Ever wondered what happens when an ordinary guy gets a second shot at life, only to find himself in a world of gods, demons, and undead guardians? Get ready, because today we're diving deep into the epic journey of William Mary Blood, a story that will redefine what it means to be a hero. Stick around, because you won't want to miss a single beat of the Faraway Paladin Season 1. A long, long time ago, when the world was nothing more than a chaotic swirl of formless mana, there were no lands, no skies, no life of any kind. From this absolute void, a single god emerged with but one command. He willed the earth into existence. The surrounding mana immediately condensed, solidifying into firm ground beneath his feet. Then, declaring the sky into being, the remaining mana soared upwards, forming the heavens above. This very tale was being read by Gus, an ancient scholar, as he tutored a young boy named Will. Curious as always, the boy wasn't merely listening, he was actively interjecting, commenting on the intricate relationship between words and mana. Gus, a tad exasperated, gently chided him, reminding Will that he was teaching for free and that he should listen to the end before jumping to conclusions. After that, the boy fell silent and the lesson continued. Gus explained that after the creation of earth and sky came the sun, the moon, and the diverse elements of nature such as fire and lightning. In time, other gods were also born, but alongside them, malicious deities emerged. To contend with this, the creator god fashioned language, words capable of describing and controlling these entities. Thus, the profound connection between gods, words, and power came into being. To demonstrate, Gus inscribed a word in the air. As he finished, the text burst into flames. The word was Ignis, meaning fire. Immediately afterward, he wrote another word signifying extinguish. When this new word was placed over the flaming one, the flames vanished instantly. Following the lesson, Will made his way to the temple where the statues of the gods stood. Walking through the hallowed space, he observed each one, recalling their names. Volt, the god of lightning. Mater, the Earth Mother Goddess. Blaze, the god of fire and technology. W, the god of wind. Sylph, associated with the winds, and Light, the god of knowledge. Then, Will paused before the statue of Gracefield, the goddess of reincarnation. At the base of the statue, an ancient, incomplete text was carved. The boy quickly realized it had been deliberately left unfinished. If the phrase were complete, it could activate the power of divine words. As he pondered this, a girl named Mary approached and touched his shoulder. Seeing Will's keen interest, she explained that Gracefield was the daughter of Volt and Mater, and she governed the cycle of reincarnation. Mary showed profound respect for Mater, stating that among the 6 gods, she was the most revered, for her blessings reached both Earth and humanity. Their conversation concluded when Mary announced it was time to return home for dinner. On their way, Blood appeared, carrying an enormous wild boar he had hunted specifically for Will. Soon the meal was prepared, and the boy thanked him repeatedly. Blood merely smiled and remarked that Will was getting old enough to start hunting himself. After all, learning to take the lives of other beings was part of a warrior's path. Hearing this, Will was visibly shaken. Mary immediately chastised Blood, insisting that Will was still too young to handle such matters. Gus, who had been quietly seated in a corner, agreed with her. Despite being only 3 years old, Will could already read books and memorize many things with ease. For Gus, this was proof that the boy was a true genius and should focus on his studies instead of learning to hunt so early. The discussion between Blood and Gus erupted right there at the table. Despite his intimidating appearance as a skeleton, Blood possessed a gentle heart. While the two argued, Will picked up a piece of bread and asked Mary when she had baked it. Mary simply smiled, avoiding a direct answer. Will already sensed secrets hidden among them. Since birth, he had lived only with Blood, Mary, and Gus. Each of them harbored something they wouldn't reveal, and Will himself held a secret he couldn't tell. He vividly remembered his previous life. Will was in fact someone who had reincarnated from another world. Will distinctly recalled the day he arrived in this world. When Blood, Mary, and Gus first appeared before him, the boy was terrified. In that moment, he believed he would be devoured by those strange creatures. However, Mary gently approached him, simply stroking his head to calm him. That's how the 3 came to care for him. After living there for 187 days, on the 188th day, Mary finally took Will outside the temple for the very first time. Stepping out, he witnessed something he would never forget: the radiant sunlight, the deep blue sky, and the scent of grass and trees.
Confronted by that breathtaking landscape, Will began to weep. When he had first arrived in that world, he believed he had been sent to hell. But in that moment, he realized he was wrong. This new life was a blessing. Someone had granted him another chance to live, and he resolved that this time, he would live it to the fullest. Over time, his routine became established. In the mornings, he trained in swordsmanship with Blood. In the afternoons, he learned magic with Gus. Despite his sword training, Will showed even greater talent for magic. Often, he could memorize Gus's explanations after hearing them just once. During one class, Gus commented that magic was important, but something even more crucial existed: money. To him, having money meant being able to acquire anything. Recalling that he had never had the chance to count mountains of gold or jewels, Gus began to lament dramatically. In the evenings, Will studied with Mary, who taught him theory, knowledge about monsters, and various everyday things. This is how Will discovered that Mary, Blood, and Gus were undead. The three had made a pact with an immortal god, remaining in this world to fulfill their own desires. One day, Blood took Will hunting. The boy held a small bird, but hesitated greatly before he could bring himself to kill it. Afterward, he stated that he disliked doing such things. Blood explained that he didn't enjoy killing either, but a warrior needed to learn to face that reality to survive. Later, Blood decided to test the boy's progress in a combat drill. To balance the fight, he allowed Will to use magic. The battle began with Will maintaining distance, casting several spells. Even so, Blood quickly closed the gap. The combat ended swiftly, but Blood praised the boy's progress. Gus then commented that he initially found adopting an orphan useless, but now Will was becoming useful. Blood immediately reprimanded him for speaking like that in front of the boy. Realizing he had overstepped, Gus ended up apologizing, which surprised Will. On the way back, Blood explained that Gus merely struggled with choosing his words, but cared about him nonetheless. He also promised that one day he would tell Will the whole truth when he was strong enough to face it. Among the three, Mary was the one who taught him most about life. She showed him simple tasks like planting trees and tending to the earth. One morning, while Will was caring for the plants, Mary asked him to continue the work because she needed to go pray to Mater, the earth goddess. Every day, she entered a prayer room, and Will had been instructed never to enter there. Later, upon returning, Will saw Mary leaving the temple with a loaf of bread in her hands, which piqued his curiosity. That night, unable to ignore his doubt, Will decided to sneak into the temple. Inside, he found Mary, engulfed in intense flames. Frightened, Will tried to save her and ended up severely burned. When he awoke, Blood severely chastised him for his recklessness. Gus, on the other hand, considered his actions courageous. Then they revealed the truth. The bread Will ate every day was a blessing from the goddess Mater. Mary explained that Mater and the immortal god were enemies. Since she, Blood, and Gus had made a pact with this god, it meant they had betrayed the goddess. That's why, whenever Mary prayed, her body suffered from the flames. Even so, she continued to pray every day because despite everything, Mater still continued to bless Will. After hearing this, Will understood Mary's sacrifice and then made a decision. From the next day on, he would also pray alongside her to share the pain Mary endured every day.
Will's study routine continued normally, and in one of the lessons, Gus decided to explain more about the gods represented in the temple statues. To humans, these divinities were seen as benevolent gods, but for other divine entities, the story could be quite different. As an example, Gus recounted an ancient conflict. In the past, the god of war, Eltrit, battled Volt, the god of lightning. At the beginning of the war, Eltrit held the advantage. However, the situation completely changed when Volt received the support of his wife, Mater, the Earth Mother Goddess. With this blessing, Volt turned the tide and won the confrontation. After that, Eltrit disappeared, biding his time to seek revenge. Even hearing only this small snippet of the story, Will drew several conclusions. For him, conflicts between gods were not so different from the human world, where power, authority, and violence often dictated the course of events. Gus was impressed by his analysis and praised the boy for his intelligence. He then delved deeper into the explanation. After his victory, Volt became associated with order. Eltrit, on the other hand, was eventually treated as a malevolent god. But Gus explained that this division between good and evil gods depended heavily on who was telling the story. If Volt ever became corrupt, for example, perhaps it would be Eltrit who would overthrow him. After class, Will went to the temple and sat before the statues of the gods. He cleared his mind and began to pray, ignoring past and future to focus only on that moment. Will remained in this state for 5 consecutive days until Mary appeared and announced that the prayer session was over.
Leaving the temple with her, we realize that 5 years have passed since the day Will suffered burns trying to save Mary. Even with magic capable of fully healing those wounds, Will chose not to remove them. According to Blood, that scar was like proof of his courage, something akin to a medal. After that, Will returned to his lessons with Gus. Now older, the demands had increased significantly. The tasks were so numerous that he often had to spend the entire night studying to complete everything. Even so, each day, Gus increased the difficulty even further, almost as if testing his limits. When he finished his studies, Will went to train in swordsmanship with Blood. This time, Blood had prepared a different opponent, a dried skeleton created from the corpse of a demon transformed into an undead. The appearance of the creature initially startled Will, but when the skeleton raised its sword and lunged, the boy reacted immediately and defeated it with a single blow. Blood was surprised by the swift victory. He refrained from praising Will to prevent the boy from becoming arrogant. However, noticing the confidence on his face, Blood decided to raise the training level even further. The house where they lived was perched atop a mountain, and below lay an ancient city. It had been 13 years since Will arrived in this world, and this would be the first time he was allowed to descend there. As they walked, Blood explained that this place was once an incredibly bustling city. Today, however, everything had changed. Now only undead wandered through the ruins. This was why he had always forbidden Will from going there alone. The two continued into a deep cave. When they reached the interior of the tunnel, Blood asked Will to prepare his equipment well, because the true test was about to begin. Then he explained the challenge. Will would have to find his own way out of that tunnel. As soon as he finished speaking, Blood dropped the oil lamp into the water, extinguishing the only light source, and vanished into the darkness. Suddenly, Will found himself completely alone inside the cave.
After Blood extinguished the lamp and vanished, Will found himself alone in the completely dark tunnel. Without losing a beat, he conjured a light spell on his shield to illuminate his surroundings. Looking around, he realized Blood had indeed gone. In his place, 2 undead began to approach. With no choice, Will fought them and managed to defeat them. After the combat, he sat, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. The solitude of that place reminded him of the feeling he had in his past life, but now everything was different. In this life, he had 3 extraordinary masters. In this world, 15 was the age of adulthood, and he was only 2 years away. That's why the training was becoming increasingly rigorous. Thinking about this, Will stood up and continued through the tunnel. Soon, he encountered another undead. From Gus's teachings, Will realized that this creature was different as it possessed magical ability. For a moment, he considered avoiding confrontation, but decided to fight. The enemy attacked using a spear. During the fight, Will realized that this opponent was still far from Blood's level. He jumped to dodge the blow and counterattacked, aiming for the undead's head. The attack defeated the enemy, but Will's sword shattered on impact. Without a weapon, he began to think about what to do. Then, he noticed the spear the enemy had been using. Picking it up, he found an inscription carved on the shaft, a weapon crafted by the dwarf race. Will decided to use it and continued on his way. As he advanced through the subterranean ruins, he observed the abandoned state of the place and imagined that no one had lived there for many years. This again raised the question of where he truly came from. Suddenly, a wind blew behind him. Startled, Will turned and saw Gus. Thinking his master had come to retrieve him, he approached, relieved. However, Gus said nothing. Instead, he conjured magic and created a stone golem to attack him. Will reacted immediately, using the spear. He destroyed the golem's core, but Gus's attack continued. Enchanted stones and several spells were hurled at him. Will tried to run while casting counterspells, but Gus's casting speed was far greater. Soon, Will was hit and fell to the ground. Even wounded, he tried to get up, unable to understand why Gus would be trying to kill him. Will picked up the spear and lunged to attack, but at the last instant, he stopped. Will realized that Gus was still holding back. If he truly wanted to kill him, he could destroy the entire tunnel with fire magic. With tears in his eyes, Will dropped the spear. To him, Blood, Mary, and Gus were his family. If he had to choose between fighting them or dying, he would prefer to accept death. Seeing this, Gus began to laugh. He approached, stroked Will's head, and said the boy had passed the test. Then he led Will out of the tunnel. After this event, Will became even more convinced that the ancient city and the 3 people who raised him were linked to his past. The discovered spear was named Moon. The magical inscriptions on it allowed the blade to emit light and the shaft to expand or contract.
From then on, Blood began taking him to the ruins more often for training, while Gus's lessons decreased. One day, Gus gave another practical task: descend into the city's tunnels and search for ancient coins. At first, he thought it was part of his training, but then discovered that Gus and Blood used the coins to gamble. He initially disliked it, but after being provoked by the two, he eventually joined in the fun until Mary appeared and reprimanded all three. Sometime later, an important matter arose. On the day of his coming-of-age ceremony, Will would have to fight Blood. Then, Gus asked a strange favor, that Will lose the fight on purpose without Blood noticing. Will immediately refused. To him, this didn't seem like something Gus would do. If there was a reason, he wanted to know what it was, but Gus merely apologized and said he couldn't explain. Confused, Will went to the temple to think. There, Mary and Blood appeared to discuss another important decision. During the coming-of-age ceremony, Will would also have to choose a god to serve. At first, he thought of choosing the same god they followed, but Mary interrupted him and said the most important thing was to choose which god he wished to emulate. The chosen deity would grant their blessing, but the greater the blessing, the greater the risk that came with it. This power could transform Will into a great hero or make his life much more difficult. That's why Mary asked him to think very carefully before deciding.
That afternoon, Will was training on the horizontal bar. When Blood appeared to speak with him, the boy thought another training exercise was coming, but Blood had another idea, inviting him to drink together. Since Will was still too young for alcohol, Blood prepared a drink mixing water with honey. Will was a little worried about what Mary would say if she found out, but Blood insisted he was almost an adult and needed to start getting used to it. After drinking a little, both felt slightly dizzy. In this mood, Blood proposed a game of dares. His first idea was to peek at Mary while she changed clothes. The two silently approached her bedroom door while Blood tried to look through the crack. Will didn't like the situation and ended up walking straight into the room. Mary was startled by the intrusion and reacted immediately, slapping him across the face. The next morning, Will woke up early, the handprints still on his face. Now older, he realized that situation had stirred reactions in him that made him feel embarrassed. To resolve this, he rushed to the well to wash his clothes. Blood noticed what had happened and began to laugh, teasing Will. After that, Will returned to his sword training. The coming-of-age ceremony was fast approaching. When the fight against Blood ended, it would also be time for Will to leave the temple. While training, he remembered the strange request Gus had made, to lose the fight on purpose. Will still didn't know whether to accept or not. At that moment, Mary appeared, bringing him a new set of armor. As she helped Will don the equipment, she asked which god he intended to follow. Will simply smiled and replied that he had made his decision. He intended to win the fight that day. Soon after, Will headed to the duel site with Blood. Before starting, Blood reiterated the rules. The fight would only end when one of them lost the ability to continue. With his helmet on, Will assumed a defensive stance. As soon as the combat began, Blood immediately launched a sequence of fast, heavy attacks. The pressure was immense, and Will had to concentrate entirely just to defend himself. Blood's blows rained down like a storm. Will knew that a single direct hit could end the fight. Trying to change the situation, Will retreated, threw a dagger to distract Blood, and tried to close in. Even so, he gained no advantage. Realizing he couldn't win by simply confronting Blood's strength, Will decided to completely change his strategy. He lunged directly into his master's attack. Using his shield with precision, Will slightly deflected Blood's blow and used the sword's momentum to leap over him, tackling his opponent to the ground. As Will prepared to deliver the final blow, Blood reacted quickly. He grabbed Will by the neck and threw him backward. Even falling into an awkward position, Will still tried to continue fighting. Blood's sword was already pressed against his neck, but when Will looked back, he noticed something unexpected. His own sword had pierced Blood's ribs. In that moment, Will understood that he could no longer continue, so he accepted defeat. As soon as Will admitted defeat, Mary came running and began to reprimand Blood. She reminded him that she had forbidden him from using that technique during the fight. Blood feigned not understanding the reason for the scolding. Then Mary explained to Will. When he was still alive, Blood used an extremely risky move. He would allow the enemy's sword to pierce his own body, trapping the blade between his ribs. This created a perfect opening for a counterattack. Because it was a desperate and dangerous technique, Mary had forbidden him from using it. After the fight, the three sat together. Blood and Mary said they had taught him everything they could. From then on, Will would have to forge his own path. Hearing that, Will thanked them and sincerely called them Mom and Dad. The declaration caught Blood and Mary by surprise. Then Blood laughed and said he didn't have much to offer, but he could still give him something important. He handed Will a sword as proof of his coming of age. Will examined the weapon as Blood explained that it was called Mundane Eater, a very powerful magic sword.
The inscriptions carved on it were ancient and difficult to understand. Even so, blood revealed its main ability. Whenever the blade struck an enemy, it restored the vitality of its wielder. In other words, the more Will fought with it, the more advantage he would gain. But Blood also gave a serious warning. He told Will not to rely too much on this sword. The more one trusted in this power, the weaker they would ultimately become. That's why it was considered a demonic sword. With the delivery of the weapon, the coming-of-age ceremony came to an end. Now it was time for Will to discover the truth. With Mary's permission, Blood began to recount the past.
About 200 years ago, a terrible demon king initiated a devastating war across the continent. He massacred entire peoples and used human flesh and blood as sacrifices to a primordial god. Furthermore, he possessed terrifying power. He could create soldiers using his own blood and flesh. He also wielded a demonic sword, the same one now in Will's hands. When almost no one believed he could be defeated, a wandering sage named Gus appeared, bringing a prophecy. According to him, that was the moment to overthrow the Demon King. The plan was to invade the tunnels of the ancient city and steal the demonic sword. Without it, the enemy would lose his ability to recover. But Blood interrupted the story. They couldn't defeat him. When they finally cornered him, the Demon King revealed his full power. Blood suffered his worst defeat in combat. Unable to kill him, only one option remained: to seal him away. Mary and Gus performed the ritual, and the seal worked. Soon after, the god Stagnate appeared before them. As the Demon King possessed the power to kill even gods, Stagnate thanked them for the seal. In return, he made a proposal: to transform the three into undead so they could protect the seal eternally. Even being called a negotiation, they practically had no choice. Thus, Blood, Mary, and Gus became undead and spent the last 200 years guarding that place. Thanks to the barrier created by Gus, they didn't even know if humans still existed outside. Until one day, Will appeared. He had been brought by demons. Gus was against raising him, but Mary and Blood decided to care for the boy. After hearing the whole story, Will understood what he needed to do. He intended to venture out into the world, make new allies, and learn more. One day, he planned to return to restore that city. At that moment, Mary stood up and embraced Will tightly. Her words sounded like a farewell. Suddenly, the sky darkened. The god Stagnate appeared. According to the agreement made centuries ago, it was time to take Mary and Blood. The divine pressure was so immense that Will fell to his knees, unable to react. When all seemed lost, Gus suddenly emerged. He shouted for Will to flee immediately with Mary and Blood. Gus would stay behind to confront the god and buy them time. In the most critical moment, Gus began to chant an impressive sequence of spells against Stagnate. First, he doubled the magic, then tripled it, and then reached the level of quadrupling the enchantment. The amount of mana unleashed was absurd. Will was completely surprised, as the power Gus displayed there was far greater than anything he had seen before. A spell of that level would normally require several mages conjuring together, but Gus performed it all alone. The magic trapped the malevolent god for an instant. Taking advantage of the opening, Gus launched a powerful final attack, a devastating storm that struck Stagnate directly. After the blow, Gus turned to check if Mary, Blood, and Will were all right. Realizing that Mary and Blood still maintained their souls intact, he believed for a moment that it was all over, but hope lasted only a second. Suddenly, Gus was cleaved in two. Stagnate reappeared shortly after. He revealed that what had been destroyed was merely one of his avatars. Even so, the god admitted that defeating that simple form was impressive and recognized that Gus was truly an extraordinary mage. Therefore, instead of eliminating him immediately, Stagnate decided to spare him for now. He then turned his attention to Will. Paralyzed by fear, the boy couldn't react as the god slowly approached. Stagnate began to speak, thanking Will for something he himself hadn't fully understood yet. Then he explained the pact that existed with Mary, Blood, and Gus. Originally, the three were transformed into undead with a single mission: to protect the seal that kept the Demon King imprisoned. However, there was a condition to this agreement. If they ever lost their hatred and obsession for the Demon King, the pact would be terminated. At that moment, they would cease to be guardians and would become Stagnate's servants. According to the god himself, this had already begun to happen. Thanks to Will's presence, Mary and Blood had stopped living solely for the duty of the past. They had begun to cling to life again. Gus still resisted a bit, but the bond was also weakening. After explaining everything, Stagnate made a proposal directly to Will. If he agreed to become an undead, he could continue living alongside Mary, Blood, and Gus forever. But the god did not demand an immediate answer. Instead, he decided to make the situation more interesting. Will would have until the sunset of the next day to decide.
After that, Stagnate simply vanished. That same night, a heavy rain began to fall. Will carried Mary, Blood, and Gus back home, finally understanding the entire situation. Now he comprehended why Gus had tried to kill him, and also why he had asked him to lose the fight against Blood. All of it had a single objective: to keep their obsession with the Demon King alive, to prevent the pact with Stagnate from breaking. As he thought about this, Will realized how much the three had always sacrificed for him. Unable to bear the weight of this reality, he fell to his knees and began to weep. To him, it seemed there was no way to repay everything they had done for his life. The next morning, Will woke up to find Mary, Blood, and Gus by his side. The three talked and acted as if everything were normal, but Will sensed that this tranquility was merely an attempt to hide the true situation. During their conversation, Blood insisted that Will leave that place as quickly as possible. At that moment, Will decided to reveal something he had kept secret for a long time. He confessed that he possessed memories of his past life. In that previous life, he considered himself useless, someone who only brought problems to his family. And even now, in this new life, he felt he had also caused suffering for Mary, Blood, and Gus. Overwhelmed by guilt, Will began to cry. But before he could continue to disparage himself, Mary interrupted him with a slap. She wouldn't accept Will calling himself trash. To her, everything he had done in this life proved exactly the opposite. The past no longer mattered. What mattered was who he chose to be now. Mary then asked if Stagnate's threat was enough to make him give up. Soon after, Blood and Gus also encouraged him, saying that Will needed to act with resolve and stop drowning in regrets. Their words made Will regain his determination. Determined to protect his family, he went to the temple and knelt before the statue of the thunder god, Volt. There, Will made a promise. He would fight against evil gods to protect the people important to him. Afterward, Will prepared to face Stagnate. When the god reappeared, Will declared that he would not accept becoming his servant. Stagnate interpreted that as a challenge. Before fighting directly, he decided to test Will and summoned an enormous quantity of undead to attack him. Even surrounded by hundreds of enemies, Will confronted them all, using magic to reinforce his movements. Upon noticing an undead trying to cast a spell, he used acceleration magic and immediately defeated it. The skill Will displayed impressed even Stagnate. Seeing that, the god paused the attack for a moment and tried to persuade him again. He spoke of creating an eternal world where everything would remain forever. Then, Stagnate cut his own hand and let the blood fall into a chalice. If Will drank that blood, he would become immortal. Will lowered his weapon and approached. For an instant, it seemed he had accepted the proposal, but the next moment, he drew the mundane eater's sword and cut Stagnate's hand. The sword was able to wound even a god. Even so, Stagnate reacted quickly. The blood in the chalice transformed into a serpent that coiled around Will's legs and knocked him down, causing him to lose consciousness. When he awoke, Will found himself in a different place, a silent lake. There, a girl holding a lamp approached him. She was Gracefeel, the goddess of light. Gracefeel asked why he had refused Stagnate's offer. Will answered sincerely. In his past life, he had lived without purpose, as if he were already dead inside. After being reborn in that world, he decided he wanted to live truly and die with dignity when the time came. To live eternally like Stagnate's would mean returning to that empty person. Will preferred to live alongside those he loved and accept life's natural end. His words made Gracefeel acknowledge him. She extended her hand and declared that from that moment on, she would be his guide. Soon after, Will awoke again before Stagnate. He clasped his hands in prayer to Gracefeel, and a sacred flame enveloped his body. It was the same sacred fire he had already endured alongside Mary during prayers. With the blessing of the goddess of light, Will rose again. Stagnate ordered his army of undead to attack, but now Will's sacred magic purified the enemies with a single blow. In a short time, all the undead vanished, leaving only Stagnate. Will used acceleration magic and charged to attack him. After a powerful blow, the god disappeared from his sight. Unsure of where the attack might come from, Will remained alert. At that moment, Gracefeel briefly appeared and touched his shoulder as if trying to guide him. Will tried to understand what that meant until he realized something terrifying. He was very far from the temple. Suddenly, he understood the truth.
From the beginning, Stagnate had never been interested in Will. The true targets had always been Blood and Mary. Realizing this, Will panicked and immediately cast acceleration magic, running as fast as possible back to the temple to try to save them. Upon entering the temple, the scene before him was terrifying. Gus was suspended high above, completely immobilized, while Stagnate was already before Mary and Blood, about to touch them. Even exhausted from the previous battle, Will charged with all the strength remaining in his body. Deep down, however, he felt it might already be too late. Not even the divine power he had received seemed sufficient to prevent what was about to happen. The instant Stagnate's hand was almost reaching Mary and Blood, an intense flash of light suddenly emerged and pushed the evil god away. The one responsible was Mater, the earth goddess. For a brief moment, she manifested before them and blocked Stagnate's attack. Before disappearing, Mater looked at Mary with a serene smile. Seeing that, Mary couldn't hold back her tears. In that moment, Will finally understood something important. Mater had never abandoned Mary. Even after everything that had happened in the past, the goddess never withdrew her blessing, and in the most dangerous moment, she still appeared to protect her. Mary's kindness had been recognized. Thanks to Mater's momentary intervention, a small opening appeared. Will realized that this was his only chance. Wielding the demonic sword Mundane Eater and guided by Gracefield's blessing, he charged and delivered a direct blow. But his target was neither Mary nor Blood. Will knew that if he tried to free them from Stagnate's control, the evil god himself would be forced to intervene to stop him. And that's exactly what happened. Stagnate immediately emerged to block the attack. The same instant their powers collided, Blood rose and launched an attack, surprising the evil god. Trying to regain the advantage, Stagnate began to prepare a spell, but before he could complete it, Gus's voice echoed through the temple. Even trapped, the old mage cast a silence spell, preventing Stagnate from conjuring any magic. This was the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, Will charged with everything he had. He delivered a sequence of rapid blows against the evil god, completely ignoring the curses Stagnate hurled at him. In the end, Will pointed his sword directly at the enemy's face and declared firmly, "He will live and die as a human, in the name of Gracefield." Faced with this determination, Stagnate's body began to fade. The evil god was finally expelled from there. Exhausted, Will fell to his knees, trying to catch his breath. Reflecting on everything that had happened, he realized that every technique used in that battle came from the teachings of Mary, Blood, and Gus. Without them, that victory would never have been possible. Without everything he had learned from them, he would never have been able to banish the evil god. Immediately afterward, Mary and Blood ran to him. The two encouraged him, happy to see that Will had overcome that impossible fight. Shortly after, Gus also descended from above and approached the group. Noticing Will's tear-filled eyes, the atmosphere among them became even more emotional. Even so, Blood decided to lighten the heavy mood. Excited, he suggested they all throw a party to celebrate Will's victory. Gus immediately jumped on board, even deciding to bring out some of his ancient, long-stored wines. This time, Mary didn't stop Will from drinking. Even so, she held his shoulder firmly and warned him that if he overdid it, he'd get a scolding later. Meanwhile, Gus eagerly went to prepare everything. But when Blood and Mary tried to stand up to follow him, something happened. They simply couldn't stand anymore. Blood let out a long sigh and finally admitted the truth. Although he wished to continue for one more night, it was no longer possible. As undead who had lost their devotion to Stagnate and no longer desired to continue living in that way, they could no longer remain in that world. Their time had come to an end. Even trying to remain calm, Blood spoke to Will like a father trying to reassure his son. There was no reason for sadness. It was natural for parents to depart before their children. They had already lived 2 centuries beyond what they should have. Now they could finally rest. Even understanding this, Will couldn't accept it. He had promised he would save them both. He dreamed that one day when he returned from his adventures, he would still see Blood and Mary again. He wanted to train swordsmanship with Blood once more. He wanted to continue helping Mary with household chores, and when he had his own family, he also wanted them to teach his children just as they had taught him. Unable to contain his grief, Will began to cry desperately. Seeing this, Mary gently stroked his face. She asked him not to get lost in sadness. This was their last moment together, and they didn't want the farewell to be marked only by suffering. Then, as his parents, Mary and Blood left Will their final words and advice.
With tears in his eyes, Will listened to each one attentively and promised to cherish everything for the rest of his life. Those teachings would become the light that would guide his path, just like the light Gracefield had granted him. Shortly after, Gus returned with the wine. For the first and last time, the four drank together. The first glass also became the last, a moment both warm and profoundly painful. When the farewell finally arrived, Gracefield, the goddess of light, appeared to guide the souls of Mary and Blood.
The next morning, Will built a tomb for the two of them. Before his parents' graves, he clasped his hands in prayer and promised that this would not be a definitive goodbye. That place would always be his home, and one day when he made new friends and started his own family, he would return there to introduce them to Mary and Blood. While Will was still standing before the tomb, Gus appeared behind him. The old mage then handed Will a pouch full of money, a treasure he had guarded for 200 years. For Gus, stagnant wealth had no value. He hoped Will would use it for something significant in the outside world. After that, Gus revealed another truth. The previous night, he had spoken with Gracefield. Since the Demon King's seal still needed a guardian, Gus was permitted to continue existing for another 10 years before moving on to reincarnation. On the other hand, by directly interfering with Gus's life and death, Gracefield had spent some of her power. From now on, faith in the goddess would depend heavily on Will's actions in the world. Resolved, Will prepared to leave, but before he went, Gus called him one more time. To live in the outside world, Will needed a full name. Mary and Blood had already given him his first name. Now Gus decided to give him a surname. Following the human custom of using parents' names, from that moment on, the boy would be known as William Mary Blood. Will smiled upon hearing that and thanked him. He truly liked that name. Thus began the journey of William Mary Blood, carrying with him the legacy of those who raised him. After leaving the ancient city behind, Will continued his journey into the outside world. Along the way, he encountered various demons, but after everything he had learned from Blood and having even faced a god, these creatures no longer posed a great threat to him. Following the course of a stream, Will walked for a long time without encountering anyone. Rain began to fall, and he decided to take shelter in a small abandoned pavilion. There, alone and in silence, the cold and solitude eventually brought a feeling of sadness. When the rain finally stopped, Will returned to the road. Continuing to follow the river, he eventually stumbled upon an ancient city in ruins. Excited by the possibility of finding someone, he rushed to investigate the place. However, as he got closer, he realized the city had been completely abandoned for a long time. In the center of the area was a huge crater, as if an extremely powerful spell had struck that area in the past. After confirming there were no survivors there, Will went to the riverbank and offered a prayer to Gracefield, asking the goddess to guide the souls that might still wander that place. Back to the cycle of reincarnation, with the prayer concluded, he continued his journey. However, the bridge crossing the river had collapsed, preventing Will from immediately proceeding. With no other option, he had to spend another night there. His provisions were also starting to dwindle, and although he could still produce bread thanks to his blessings, Will felt an increasing desire to find other people. The next morning, he decided to continue following the river, believing that sooner or later he would find some human settlement. Suddenly, a rustling from the bushes caught his attention. Thinking it might be a demon, Will quickly drew his spear and prepared to fight. But what emerged from the vegetation was in fact a wild boar charging towards him. Surprised, Will reacted instinctively and struck the animal with his spear. As he was about to deliver the final blow, he sensed someone behind him. Turning around, he saw a man aiming a bow and arrow at him. By the type of arrow lodged in the boar and the one the man held, it was clear the animal was already being hunted by him. After so long traveling alone, Will had finally encountered another human being. He didn't want to turn this first encounter into a fight, so he tried to think of a way to avoid a confrontation. Observing the stranger more closely, Will noticed symbols on his clothes and deduced his origin. Then he began to speak in Elven language. Thanks to this, the man lowered his bow and replied. He explained that the boar was his prey and that Will had interfered with his hunt. Will almost apologized by reflex, a habit he still carried from his past life, but quickly controlled himself so as not to appear too submissive. Instead, he smiled and argued that since he had delivered the final blow to the animal, it would be fair for him to receive a portion of the meat. The polite way Will spoke ended up convincing the hunter. The two then began to divide the boar, fairly separating parts of the animal. Since the organs needed to be consumed quickly, they ended up preparing a small meal right there. While the hunter gathered firewood, Will subtly lit the fire using magic, being careful not to reveal his abilities. Before eating, he offered a long prayer, thanking the gods. Seeing this, the hunter commented that Will was incredibly devout, almost excessively so. After the meal, the hunter prepared to leave.
Before that, Will asked for information about the region. The man explained that this place was known as the Beast Forest, practically the border of human territory. Observing Will's strange clothes and behavior, he imagined the boy was some kind of explorer. Will simply accepted the assumption. Then, the hunter pointed the way along the river. If Will continued in that direction for about 2 days, he would reach a small village. Curious, Will asked if he could visit his village. The question made the man uncomfortable. He immediately refused and made it clear that he didn't want Will to accompany him. Without insisting, Will merely watched as he walked away. Before leaving, the man responded to Will's call and revealed his name, Menel. That night, Will camped near the stream. Even knowing little about Menel, he felt happy to have finally talked to someone after so long traveling alone. During the night, however, Will had a vision sent by Gracefield. In it, he saw that Menel's village was about to be embroiled in conflict. As soon as he woke up, Will gathered his things and headed in the direction he saw in the vision. Using magic to find his way, he quickly located the village. When he arrived, he realized the attack hadn't started yet. 2 soldiers were patrolling the area. Will was about to step out to speak with them when he sensed danger. Without hesitation, he ran and used his shield to block an arrow fired at the soldiers. Looking closer, Will noticed something strange. The arrow was identical to the one Menel used. At that moment, he understood the truth. Menel was part of the attack. From atop a rooftop, Menel fired again. While protecting the soldiers, Will allowed them to raise the village alarm. As soon as the alert sounded, the attacking group tried to flee. Will used magic to accelerate his movements and pursued Menel, blocking his path. Trying to escape, Menel used magic to make the ground tremble, but Will reacted quickly and neutralized the spell with a powerful stomp. Surprised, Menel cast fire magic, but Will cut through the attack with his sword. With nowhere else to run, Menel was struck with Will with the shaft of the spear and fell unconscious. After that, Will used his skills to tie up all the attackers.
Soon after the capture, one of the soldiers he had saved approached and introduced himself as John. He thanked Will for his help and explained the region belonged to the Fertile Kingdom, but was loosely controlled territory. John also recognized Menel as a known hunter from a nearby village. Shortly after, Tom, the village chief, appeared to thank Will for his assistance and decided to interrogate the captives. During the interrogation, the truth was revealed. Menel's village had been destroyed by demons, leaving the inhabitants without food. That's why Menel decided to attack to acquire supplies and took full responsibility for the crime. Even understanding the situation, Tom decided that the theft could not be forgiven. The chosen punishment was hanging. Observing everything in silence, Will remembered Mary's and Blood's teachings. Mary always taught compassion for those who suffered, and Blood taught to act without fear. So Will decided to intervene. He asked the villagers to spare Menel and his group, offering money as compensation. This type of agreement was accepted in the region, and Will used his pouch of coins to pay for the damages. With that, the prisoners were freed, and the villagers also helped rescue survivors from the destroyed village. Additionally, Will hired Menel to help him fight the demons. Though reluctant, Menel accepted. Thus, the two headed together into the forest. When Menel asked what the plan was, Will calmly replied, "There is no plan. We will simply charge straight at the demons." Will and Menel sought a safe place to rest. Thanks to Menel's experience in that territory, it didn't take long for him to find an ideal spot to spend the night without major risks. During dinner, Menel made something very clear again. He had only agreed to guide Will to the village. Fighting demons was not part of the agreement. Even hearing this, Will simply replied calmly, saying that it was no problem. If necessary, he would face the enemies alone. After the meal, Menel simply lay down to sleep. Will still tried to strike up a conversation, but the half-elf remained cold and didn't respond. The next morning, the two continued their journey through the forest. Along the way, they passed by some ancient ruins. Realizing that the village was near, Menel asked Will to wait there while he went ahead to assess the situation first. A short time later, Menel returned with several important pieces of information. According to what he saw, the demons were performing some kind of ritual within the village. To explain it better, Menel drew a small map on the ground. In the center of the village was a church surrounded by a magic circle, indicating that the ritual was happening inside. Outside, two demon captains stood guard. Inside the church, there was an even more dangerous creature. From the description alone, Will could imagine what kind of monster it was. Even so, he remained confident. If the enemies were only those, he believed he could handle them all. Without wasting time, Will launched an attack. As soon as he entered the village, one of the demons participating in the ritual was suddenly struck by a spear, piercing its body. Noticing the attack, the creature inside the church immediately lunged at Will. Before the monster could reach him, Will conjured a web magic, trapping the creature in place for a few moments. Then he quickly eliminated one of the demon captains who were outside. With reinforcements contained, he turned his attention to the main creature.
Despite being strong, the monster clearly wasn't on the same level as Will. Advancing with speed, he pierced the creature's throat with his spear, and soon after cast a destructive spell that finished off the monster. Only a few demons remained near the church entrance, but before Will could defeat them, they suddenly fell to the ground, struck by arrows. The one who had fired was Menel. Although he had said he wouldn't participate in the fight, he ended up intervening at the decisive moment.
After the battle, Menel approached Will with a suspicious expression. He simply couldn't understand how Will could be so strong. Will just smiled and offered a vague excuse to avoid explaining his true abilities. Soon, Will and Menel began searching the village for survivors. At first, everything indicated that no one had escaped the massacre. But then, a faint voice called out for Menel. Among the rubble, a severely burned girl managed to drag herself out. Even in that state, she still smiled upon seeing that Menel had returned. When the demons attacked the village, she had hidden. Despite suffering terrible burns, she remained silent the whole time, believing Menel would return to save her. Now that he had truly returned, she was happy. The girl extended her hand, wanting Menel to hold it. However, seeing her in that state, he became completely paralyzed. Noticing this, Will approached first. He carefully picked up the girl, stroked her head, and told her she had been very brave. With that, Menel finally regained awareness of what was happening and held her hand. Unfortunately, her wounds were too severe to be healed, so Will offered a prayer to the goddess Gracefeel, asking that the girl's soul might rest in peace. After she passed away, Menel apologized to Will. At first, he had thought Will was just a rich young man who liked to talk about the blessings of the gods, but now he realized he had been completely wrong. Will was truly a kind person. After that, the two began walking through the village, holding the hands of the dead and praying for their souls to be guided back to the cycle of reincarnation. When they finished, Menel said he wanted to show them one more place. He led Will to the door of a house and called out for Miss Marple. To Will's surprise, a woman appeared inside. She was a ghost, similar to conscious undead like Gus. At first, Will was cautious, but Miss Marple calmly approached and explained that her mind was still clear. Menel then introduced Will to her. He believed with Will's power, it would be possible to help her finally move on to the cycle of reincarnation. Hearing this, Miss Marple immediately realized that Menel was pretending to be cruel. She knew that boy well and knew he wasn't cruel. Her words ended up making Menel lose control. He began to shout, saying that the village had been destroyed and many people had died. Desperate, he even tried to strike Miss Marple several times, but since she was a ghost, his blows passed through her body. Powerless, Menel eventually fell to the ground, crying. As a half-elf, he had a very long life and had already endured too much suffering. In that moment, he just wanted to go with her. Even so, Miss Marple continued to smile. She said that Menel was a good person, and that there were still many things in the world he needed to experience. Even if he hated the gods, she believed the gods still cared about him. Before leaving, Miss Marple showed Will a mountain behind the village. According to her, the demon leader was in that place and was probably planning something. Entrusting them with this information, she finally said goodbye, wishing Menel a happy life. With that, her soul finally departed in peace. A few days later, the villagers returned. Despite the shock of seeing the destruction, they helped Will build tombs and perform ceremonies for the dead. After the memorial, everyone organized a grand feast. Later that night, Will found Menel and the two talked. Menel recounted his past and how Miss Marple had saved his life years ago. After everything that had happened, Menel finally made a decision. He knelt before Will and asked him to guide him on the right path, promising to dedicate his life to atoning for his mistakes. Will accepted the request with a smile. From that moment on, the two journeyed together. During the feast, while drinking with his arm around Menel's shoulder, Will thought of his former adoptive parents and proudly stated that Menel was the first true friend he had made in his life. Following the initial efforts to rebuild the village, reality began to sink in. The livestock were completely decimated and the agricultural tools had vanished. Without means to cultivate, the villagers faced the grim prospect of resorting to purchases from the city of white sails, though most lacked sufficient funds. Will observed the conversation, curious about what white sails might be and even interested in the local history. Menel, noticing Will's ignorance about rural life in Willow, decided to explain in detail. He recounted that they were on the southern frontier, a region that 200 years ago suffered demon attacks. Despite heroic efforts to defeat the Demon King, the inhabitants had to evacuate, migrating north and founding the fertile empire. White Sails became the center of this new community. Mennel also mentioned that faith in the goddess Gracefeel had waned after the migration, understandable given the devastation and constant threat of monsters. Will, as a divine messenger, had the mission to restore faith, but for now the focus was on rebuilding the village. To raise funds, he invited Mennel to explore ruins, splitting the profit equally. With Will's ability to find relics, they quickly accumulated enough resources for reconstruction. On their way back, however, they heard screams for help. A girl and a young man were being chased by a huge ape. The girl tried to distract the animal by throwing a stone, but it turned furiously against her. Will acted instinctively, positioning himself in front of the ape. Recalling Blood's teachings on facing wild animals, he stood firm without retreating. The ape stared at Will for an instant before finally moving away. Relieved, Will checked if the girl was okay. Her eyes lit up as she recognized the divine messenger before her. The girl introduced herself, accompanied by Tonio, an iterant merchant whose guild had gone bankrupt, and herself, a wandering singer. Will introduced himself as a servant of the goddess Gracefeel, sparking great enthusiasm in the young woman. Mennel intervened to understand why they were alone in the forest. Tonio explained that on their way to White Sails, they had hired guards who fled at the sight of monsters, leaving them vulnerable. Mennel, amused, reminded Will that it was a business matter and not something to get involved in. To help them, Mennel offered to escort them to White Sails in exchange for a simple purchase of cattle and horses. Tonio accepted. Following Mennel to the village, the girl enchanted everyone with her music, while Tonio took the opportunity to negotiate. Observing his demeanor and skill with customers, Mennel confirmed that Tonio had indeed worked in a merchant guild. At the same moment, Tonio sought Will to request his blessings in healing injuries. With his ability, Will removed a young woman's scar without accepting payment, explaining that it was a divine blessing and suggesting that if they wished to give thanks, they could buy products from Tonio. The group continued traveling, combining B's music, Will's healing, and Tonio's sales, ensuring they wouldn't have to worry about travel costs. After 10 days, they reached a wheat field and decided to rest. B, excited, presented everyone with a heroic song, narrating past stories about a trio of adventurers, Blood, Mary, and Gus. The music revealed how they saved a village from a dragon with sacrifices and heroic strategies, culminating in Blood's victory. The account ended with B's notes on the character's future. The boy would become Count Degger, and the elf, his wife, still awaited the promise of retribution from an old ally. Will, moved, felt joy realizing that the world still held memories of his parents.
The next morning, the group prepared to continue their journey. As everyone organized themselves, Will took the opportunity to train with his spear. Tonio observed from a distance and immediately realized that the weapon was no ordinary one. From the quality of the spear, he understood that it was a true masterpiece. Intrigued, the merchant decided to talk to Will. Tonio had met all kinds of people in his life as a merchant: nobles, adventurers, mercenaries, and even slaves. Even so, Will was different from all of them. His strength, his courage, and especially his complete lack of interest in money greatly caught Tonio's attention. That's why he decided to ask something directly. What was Will's true objective? Faced with the unexpected question, Will answered sincerely. He recounted that in the past he had a small, warm family, but shortly before reaching adulthood, he ended up losing everyone he loved. After that, he received the blessings of the gods and decided to venture into the outside world. The reason for his journey was simple: to repay the kindness of those who raised him and to honor the grace of the goddess Gracefeel. Furthermore, Will desired something even more human. He wanted to meet people, make friends, and find new companions along the way. Hearing these words, Tonio smiled. The answer confirmed the impression he had. Will truly was a rare person in this world. Therefore, the merchant made a decision at that moment. He would continue accompanying Will on his journey. After breakfast, the group resumed their journey towards White Sails. Along the way, Tonio began to share some important news about the kingdom. Currently, the kingdom was going through a delicate period due to the succession to the throne. The current heir, Prince Owen, had not demonstrated great qualities as a leader, causing many nobles to lose confidence in him. Because of this, several vassals had begun to migrate south. Meanwhile, Owen's younger brother, Prince Ethel, was sent to govern White Sails. Unlike his brother, Ethel was considered extremely competent. Thanks to his leadership, the city grew rapidly and became a prosperous place. As Will listened attentively to this story, Bee suddenly ran up to him and tugged his sleeve excitedly. She wanted to show him something special. When Will looked ahead, he saw an impressive sight. Before them, viewed from above, was the grand city of white sails. The city flourished with buildings, activity, and prosperity. It was a clear symbol of the progress achieved in that region. For Will, that sight carried an even greater meaning. That land had been shaped by the efforts of three people he knew better than anyone: Blood, Mary, and Gus. The world before him now was part of the legacy they had helped build.
Will and his group entering White Sails City, now more familiar with the city's rhythm. Unlike other places, there were no checkpoints at the entrance, which piqued Will's curiosity. Tonio explained that this was Prince Ethel's policy. Since most supplies arrived by ship, stopping everyone for inspection could turn the city into a smuggling hub. Instead, the prince taxed merchant ships and shops, ensuring trade flowed efficiently. Bee, always enthusiastic, decided that Will should first enjoy the city's attractions. She guided him through the shopping district, full of jewels and valuable products, each discovery leaving Will more fascinated. Passing an unfamiliar pole, Will learned, from Bee's explanation, that it was a street lamp illuminating the city at night. Tonio noted the profit potential for apprentice mages who controlled these lamps, while Bee immediately recalled the city's largest public bath, something that greatly interested Will. The group enjoyed the bath, where the crystal-clear water and sauna surprised Will. After relaxing, Bee took everyone to a nearby restaurant. For the first time since leaving the temple, Will tasted refined dishes that represented the city's advancement and sophistication. Satisfied, he decided to visit the local church to greet the priests. Tonio and Bee waited outside while Will entered the temple, impressed by the beauty and grandeur of the place, almost as if he were a living painting. Inside, Will approached a man to ask for information and revealed that he served the goddess of light, Gracefield. The responsible priest was initially hesitant, as the goddess had few worshippers in the region. Will agreed to undergo verification, understanding that it was natural for few to know his deity. However, the divine messengers capable of confirming his identity were not present, so he would have to wait. At that moment, a middle-aged man approached and reprimanded the guide, revealing himself to be Begley, the church caretaker. Will introduced himself and tried to prove his status as a divine messenger using his blessing. Begley, annoyed with young messengers who relied too much on their powers, challenged Will with questions about the mission of a divine messenger and what he valued most in the goddess Gracefield. Will responded clearly, convincing Begley and obtaining permission to visit the temple. After the tour, Will returned to the group and asked about Begley. Tonio explained that the man was known for his rudeness and discreet connections with merchant guilds, but advised Will not to get too involved and to focus on the city's next tourist spot. Suddenly, an alarm bell rang through the windows. The population screamed as a dragon erupted into the city, destroying houses and spreading smoke everywhere. Will ran to the top of the temple and observed the devastation caused by the dragon. The city his parents had protected was in danger, and he couldn't stand idly by. He immediately began casting lightning magic at the monster, determined not to miss. Manel appeared and reprimanded Will, reminding him that confronting a dragon required caution. With that, Will asked for Manel and Tonio's help to evacuate the citizens, especially those inside the church. Together, Will and Manel combined their magic. Will created a web of lightning and, with the help of a wind spirit, attracted the dragon's attention. The enraged monster headed towards Will's position. He then created a protective layer around the church, which was immediately destroyed by the impact of the creature. Manel used wind to push the dragon, causing it to fall into the courtyard in front of the temple.
With the dragon brought down in the church courtyard, the perfect opportunity arose to counterattack. Without wasting time, Will cast a restriction spell to limit the creature's movements. Then, using acceleration magic, he advanced at high speed and plunged his spear directly into the dragon's chest. Even so, the blow wasn't enough to defeat it immediately. Wounded, the dragon still had the strength to react and began to prepare a fire breath. Around them, there were still many people in the area, and an attack of that size could cause a tragedy. For an instant, Will hesitated, trying to think of a solution. At that moment, he remembered Blood's teachings. Without a second thought, he threw himself onto the dragon, gripping its neck with all his might. If there was no possible strategy, all that remained was to trust in his own strength. Using all his musculature, Will squeezed the dragon's neck with everything he had. The fight became a clash of pure endurance. Little by little, the dragon lost its breath until it finally stopped moving. When the enormous body fell to the ground, the battle ended. Tonio immediately ran to Will and held his hand, thanking him for protecting the city. Soon after, Bee began to play a victory song, while the people around applauded and expressed their gratitude for the rescue. After the battle, Will and Manel helped the citizens deal with the damage caused by the dragon's attack. They spent a good part of the day assisting in the city's recovery.
Late in the afternoon, a priest ran to Will bringing an important message. The city's ruler wished to see him. Will was then led to Prince Ethel's mansion. The prince received him personally and thanked him for defeating the dragon and saving White Sails. As the city's governor, he wanted to reward Will for his deeds and asked what his desire was. Seizing the opportunity, Will decided to address a problem that worried him. He mentioned the Beast Forest, a nearby region where villagers were constantly being attacked by monsters. Will asked the prince to send troops to deal with the threat. However, Prince Ethel immediately refused him. He explained that the monsters in that forest were enveloped in a poison called miasma. Simply breathing that air could drive ordinary people mad. Because of this, sending soldiers into that area would be extremely dangerous. Hearing this, Will changed his request. If the prince couldn't send troops, then he asked for authorization to use his own money and form a group of mercenaries. His intention was to gather fighters and personally confront the monsters in the forest. Will spoke with total conviction. He believed in his own strength and couldn't ignore the suffering of the people living near that region. Listening to these words, Prince Ethel's gaze shifted. Before him was an extremely powerful man of unclear origin who wanted to gather warriors and lead a military campaign outside the direct control of the government. For a ruler, this could represent a potential threat, and Will understood exactly what the prince was thinking at that moment.
The episode began with Will staring at the prince, realizing that he wasn't just playing around, but waiting for his next move. By his side, 2 soldiers accompanied Ethel, but Will knew he could easily defeat them. However, acting that way would go against the will of the gods. He needed to find a way to convince the prince to change his mind without disrespecting his divine mission. With firmness, Will began to speak. He introduced himself as a messenger of the goddess of light, Gracefeel, destined to bring clarity to the darkest places. As a divine messenger, he was to be a pioneer and guide, bringing hope to the creatures weeping in the darkness. Placing his hand on his chest, he asked the prince for permission to proceed with his plan. The prince, listening attentively, reminded him that the path Will had chosen was extremely dangerous and that even with his permission, no one guaranteed others would follow him. But Will maintained a determined gaze, showing he would face any threat to protect the world. Impressed by the young man's courage and conviction, Prince Ethel, recognizing that Will truly possessed high-level powers and also had an intriguing companion by his side, elaborated further. Realizing Will hadn't fully understood, the prince explained more about Manel. Moments before, when he had mentioned the possibility of killing Will, Manel had looked at him with intense intent to attack, demonstrating he was not someone to be underestimated. At that instant, a commotion erupted outside the room. Bishop Begley abruptly entered, reprimanding the prince. He complained that Will was already registered at the temple, but the prince had summoned the young man without following protocols, disrespecting the church's hierarchy. Even amidst the reprimand, Ethel maintained his smile and explained that calling Will was one thing, but the decision to answer the call was entirely the young man's. He also emphasized that the temple supported his presence there, which visibly irritated Begley, who promised to demand explanations later. The prince then told the bishop about the situation with Will, admitting he had initially considered killing him, but the young man's confidence and firmness had changed his mind. Ethel decided to grant Will the title of knight, placing him under the supervision of both the prince and the church. Surprised by the speed of the decision, Begley asked for time to reflect, but had to accompany Will as he left the room. On the way, the tension between Begley and Manel escalated. Manel defended Will and responded to the bishop's authority, while the young man approached the bishop's daughter, who shared stories about her father's good deeds in the city. Will, listening, began to see Begley from another perspective. Although strict, he was someone who truly contributed to the good of society and inspired loyalty to his subordinates. Thanking the bishop for his help in the conversation with the prince, Will received criticism and advice, especially about studying the revised scriptures from 200 years ago that he needed to understand to properly fulfill his role. Begley explained that a divine blessing is not granted by strength or talent, but because God has a purpose to fulfill through that individual. Will absorbed every word, recognizing the depth of the bishop's knowledge, who, despite being outwardly harsh, showed great wisdom and dedication. At the end of the day, Begley pondered Will's responsibility as a holy knight. Although he wanted to protect him from taking on such a burden, Will insisted he would fulfill his promise to the goddess Gracefeel to dedicate his life to eradicating evil. Seeing his determination, Begley agreed and accepted the young man's commitment. The next day, Will and Menel planned their first actions. They discussed how they couldn't just randomly attack demons, they needed to focus on targets that would bring wealth and fame.
To ensure strategic impact, Will gathered a group of experienced adventurers to accompany him on exploring the monster forest, demonstrating confidence and leadership. Despite the mission's danger, they agreed to join him with some conditions regarding food, lodging, and a minimum reward. As they prepared, Will continued to show his determination and leadership skills, ready to officially begin his journey as a holy knight, guided by faith and the teachings of the goddess Gracefield. With some allies already interested in the expedition, preparations for the journey truly began. At the same time, the day Will would officially receive the title of Holy Knight was fast approaching. Because of this, he also needed to learn etiquette rules and deal with several new responsibilities. Meanwhile, Tonio was trying to solve an important problem for the expedition. The horses needed to transport the group to the beast forest. The required quantity was too large, and he didn't know how to acquire so many animals. It was then that Will suggested an unexpected solution: buy sick or debilitated horses. With his divine powers, he could easily heal them. Thus, the problem could be solved without spending so much money. When Bee learned that Will would be working with a man named Ristov, she got excited and decided to help by gathering more information. According to her, Ristov was well known in the city. He used to accept extremely dangerous missions that no one else wanted to undertake. Even performing impressive feats, he never sought fame or recognition. This behavior always piqued Bee's curiosity, but whenever she tried to ask about his past, Ristov avoided answering. Finally, the day of the ceremony arrived. Important church representatives were present, including the auxiliary bishop, in addition to Prince Ethel himself. During the ritual, Will officially received the title of Holy Knight, taking on even more responsibility before the church and the kingdom. Later that night, a small celebration took place. While Menel relaxed in a corner drinking wine, Will took the opportunity to thank the auxiliary bishop for his help during the ceremony. Even so, he couldn't help but feel a certain sadness at Begley's absence, who did not attend that important moment. Suddenly, an excited young man appeared, pulling Will by the arm. On the other side of the tavern, an arm wrestling contest was happening, and everyone wanted him to participate in the fun. Menel and Tonio were also invited to join the fun. Observing that energetic scene, Will was sincerely happy. Now, as a holy knight, he had the opportunity to live among the people of the city and share the ideals he had promised to follow, spread the light, and fulfill the mission he received from the goddess Gracefield. And so, surrounded by new allies and the support of the community, Will took another step towards his true path as a protector of that world.
With unwavering determination, Will and his group, alongside experienced adventurers, began clearing the beast forest, confronting the monsters that threatened the region. After securing some safer areas, they started transporting essential supplies to nearby villages. This aid not only benefited the villagers, allowing agricultural work to progress, but also ensured future profits, even with initial losses. Tonio handled the logistics, mobilizing resources and the necessary capital for the expedition, while Will focused on leading the adventurers in fulfilling his mission as a divine messenger. At Will's request, the Archbishop sent other sacred messengers to assist in the mission, including his daughter, Anna. Despite their youth, they were skilled in prayer and played a crucial role in the expedition. Meanwhile, Ristov's team returned from a different mission, hunting monsters that roamed the villages. Each enemy slain demonstrated Ristov's skill, known as the Piercer, capable of defeating creatures with a single blow. Beyond action, Will realized that resolving conflicts was as important as defeating monsters. With Bee's help, he managed to calm tense villages, allowing merchants to circulate again and creating a safe and prosperous environment. Gradually, the region transformed into a hub of commerce and coexistence, showing Will that prosperity and magic could walk hand in hand. However, not everything was peaceful. Pip's group, assigned to explore for up to 10 days, had not returned by the expected deadline. 2 days had already passed, and Will soon realized they might have encountered dangerous monsters. Considering Pip and his team were experienced, something extraordinary must have happened. Determined, Will gathered Menel and Ristov to investigate the disappearance, asking Ristov to call for more allies to strengthen the group. As they ascended a nearby mountain, the group found the bodies of Pip and his companions, already being devoured by crows. With sorrow, they dug a small tomb to lay them to rest. Beside the bodies, Menel discovered gigantic footprints, larger than any monster they had faced so far, revealing that the enemy force had been far superior. Will, deeply moved, prayed for the souls of his fallen companions. As they assessed the situation, Will realized that one member of the group was still missing. Menel noticed that belongings were scattered in a line leading into the mountain, signaling that someone might have tried to escape the giant monster. As they advanced, something seemed wrong. The path presented no difficulties, making the chance of escape practically impossible. Suddenly, Will realized the trap. From between the rocky walls, countless monsters surrounded the group. With no time to retreat, they formed a defense near the rocks. Will activated his miasma resistance abilities, while Menel strengthened the group with the Spirit of Wind. It was only a matter of time until they could break through the encirclement, but the situation became complicated when a gigantic monster appeared behind Menel. In an attempt to protect his allies, Menel erected a wall of earth, but the monster destroyed it with a single blow, sending him flying. About to attack him again, Will tried to use lightning magic, but his words were blocked. An attack hit him and he fell, not understanding what was happening. Feeling there was no other alternative, Will drew his demonic sword and began to fight with everything he had, a fury he would normally try to avoid, but which was now necessary to save his companions. Consumed by guilt for putting everyone in danger, he delivered incessant blows until Ristov intervened, confirming that all the monsters had been eliminated. Will rushed to heal Menel with prayer. Even exhausted from the extreme use of the demonic sword, as Menel's wounds were treated, Will fainted. Upon waking, he saw that they were near a village, and the person responsible had fled upon seeing his dead companions. Menel had been saved thanks to timely aid, and although Will wanted to visit him, Ristov insisted he needed rest. Lying down, Will reflected on what went wrong. It wasn't the strategy that failed, but the assessment of Menel's combat capability. He had given his friend a task that was too difficult, almost costing him his life. When Tonio and Bee arrived, impressed by his ability to protect everyone even against a chimera, Will felt no relief. He knew he had almost put his companions in mortal danger. Visiting Menel, Will tended his wounds and apologized, recognizing that his intention of having a reliable companion ended up imposing an excessive burden. He also asked forgiveness for the goddess Gracefield for his lack of discernment, promising that from now on he would use his power and blessings to help everyone without ever repeating the same mistake.
Will intends to eliminate all remaining monsters in the Beast Forest, including the Chimera itself. But before he can go far, Menel appears to stop him. When he asks what Will intends to do, Will responds directly. He will sweep all the monsters from the forest, and if the Chimera appears again, he himself will finish it. This answer infuriates Menel. Without hesitation, he punches Will in the face. Even so, Will remains cold, almost indifferent to his friend's reaction. To prevent Menel from continuing, he grabs his arm and immobilizes him forcefully before continuing on his way. But Menel doesn't give up. Even wounded, he gets up and begins to conjure a spell. For someone with Will's abilities, dodging would be simple. However, at that instant, he realizes something important. If he dodged, Menel would end up being hit by his own spell. Therefore, Will decides to take the attack directly. The impact knocks him to the ground. Menel runs to him, kicks his chest, and begins to reprimand him angrily. To him, Will was acting like a coward. After failing just once, he was already willing to sacrifice himself alone. Menel explains that it shouldn't have come to this point to stop him, but as friends, they need to support each other. He couldn't simply watch Will run to his death. These words finally make Will realize his mistake. The tension gradually disappears. The rain also begins to stop, and under the moonlight, the two end up laughing together. For Will, that was the first time he had seriously argued with a friend since being reborn in that world, and he feels he lost the argument. After that, the two return together to the village. There, several people were already waiting for them. Bee immediately runs to check if Will is okay, while Tonio demands an explanation for everything that happened to him. After hearing the story, Ristov reacts with a serious expression and reprimands Will. According to him, what Will is facing is common among the strongest. The greater someone's power, the greater the risk of making dangerous mistakes by trusting too much in oneself. Recognizing his fault, Will sincerely apologizes to everyone. At that moment, Menel intervenes. For him, the fact that Will recognizes his mistake is enough. Now, what really matters is dealing with the true threat that still remains in the forest. After the discussion, Menel says he can't ignore what happened. He was defeated by the Chimera and wants to face it again. Will also agrees, as that creature continues to be a threat to nearby villages. Will explains that the Chimera probably didn't arise naturally. There's a high chance it was created through demonic rituals. If it remained alive, it could easily destroy the region's fishing village. To gather more strength, Will decides to offer rewards to adventurers. Each defeated demon would be worth silver coins, while the Chimera's head would have a much larger reward. This causes several adventurers and soldiers to join the hunt.
This time, Will organizes everything more carefully. He sends scouts to investigate the area before advancing, avoiding falling into another trap. When preparations are complete, the group sets off again for the Beast Forest. They also have the support of divine messengers led by Anna. Upon reaching the cliff where they had fought before, Will orders everyone to take defensive positions. Soon, several monsters appear and the battle begins. The soldiers hold the front line while archers attack from a distance. Will uses blessings to strengthen allies and increase their resistance to the forest's miasma. While fighting, Will realizes something important. That battle doesn't depend only on him, but on everyone's teamwork. After defeating several creatures, Will and Menel proceed to an old abandoned church in the mountains. The place looks normal at first glance, but Will senses something strange and stops Menel from advancing. Using magic, he dispels a spell that hid the enemy's presence. Thus, the Chimera finally appears. The creature shows intelligence, something unusual for a monster. Will realizes it is linked to the Supreme King of Darkness, which makes the situation even more dangerous. Without hesitation, Will declares that he will defeat it in the name of the goddess Gracefield. The battle begins immediately. The Chimera attacks with brutal force, but Will manages to avoid the first blows. When the creature tries to hit Menel, he uses the power of the earth to trap the monster's claws for a few seconds. This small opening allows Will to advance and attack directly. During the combat, he realizes that the Chimera's 3 heads don't act perfectly together. Taking advantage of these coordination failures, Will manages to attack repeatedly. Wounded, the creature releases a large poisonous miasma. Even so, Will continues to advance thanks to the protection of the goddess Gracefield. After an intense confrontation, he finally finds an opening, leaps into the air, and pierces the creature's head with his spear. The Chimera is finally defeated. After the battle, Will and Menel enter the abandoned church and find Ristov, who had eliminated another monster inside. With the threat destroyed, the adventurers celebrate the victory. B even promises to turn that battle into a new song. From atop the mountain, Will and Menel observe the forest, now free of monsters. The villages can finally live in peace. Later, Menel says that the villagers want to build a temple dedicated to the goddess Gracefield. He also says that many believe Will should become the leader of the region's villages. Will is surprised, as he never thought of governing anyone, he just wanted to protect people. Even so, looking at everything they accomplished together, he realizes that this may just be the beginning of something much greater. And that, folks, was your epic recap of Season 1 of the Faraway Paladin. We covered ancient gods, fierce battles, heartfelt goodbyes, and the birth of a true hero. What was your favorite moment from Will's journey? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this recap, and subscribe to Curious Nerd for more deep dives into your favorite anime and manga. Your support helps us bring you more awesome content. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. See you next time, Curious Nerds!